no power. Weak. It's raining brains around here.
Yeah, we feel professional with that. And we're live. Welcome back, Louis.
Oh, thanks. Nice to be back.
I was saying before the podcast started that you sent me down a Scientology rabbit hole last night, my friend. I've been down those before, but last night, knowing that you were going to be on and looking forward to it eagerly, I watched a lot of stuff.
And, I spent 3 years down that rabbit hole, and it's a weird one. It's a weird one. Were you on the internet? Were you just clicking around?
Yeah, just...
There's a lot on YouTube, but there's various very, very well-resourced websites. There's one called Clambake.
I've been to that one, yeah.
And then there's all the Tony Ortega stuff. I mean, there's just whole worlds. And actually, I know there's a lot to talk about, but perhaps the biggest obstacle to making a documentary about Scientology is the overabundance of material. Because there's just so many ways to come in on it, and you could just chase intriguing leads, and then months go by, and you're no nearer to filming it.
I had a lot of thoughts on this, and one of the thoughts when I was really trying to unpack it all is that I feel like one of the reasons why a lot of these people defend Scientology, I think there's several reasons. One, because it's their team, and once you become a part of a team, it becomes something that you identify with, becomes very important to you, and then you want to defend that. So I think there's that. But also, I think some people take some benefit in what L. Ron Hubbard created. Because have you read Going Clear?
Yes.
When I read Going Clear, I watched the documentary and then I read the book. And one of the things that was more fascinating about the book was the fact that he was essentially trying to diagnose and treat himself. And he was essentially a really nutty guy.
He was very damaged.
Yeah, he had a lot going on. And he was a guy who was trying to sort of sort it out himself, and in the process brought a lot of people in and then created this thing. And some people, they get some benefit from this thing. Because I was watching some of these people that are upset with you, like that woman, it was a trailer where this woman was upset at you because you were in, I haven't seen the documentary yet, it comes out in America in January, but you were on a road you had a permit for, and she was telling you were on private land, and
that's right.
I'm looking at this woman like, seems like a reasonable, intelligent, assertive, confident woman that would probably, if she didn't get into Scientology, she would have been successful in the corporate world, right?
I'm sure.
But here she is. Her corporation is written by a nutty science fiction writer who wrote more fiction than any human that's ever walked the face of the planet. He made up more shit. He wrote down more things that never happened than anyone who's ever lived. And they don't have a problem.
I mean, you've said about 10 different things that I could break down and analyze. I mean, I'm basically on the same page as you. I think there's the first thing to acknowledge about Scientology is that it's a religion, and that all religions have a very high portion of, I'm trying to put it politely, but just bogus, fallacious, clearly nonsensical material, right? And Scientology is the same as all of those. I think there's a lot of people who've derived a lot of benefit from Scientology. I think there's people whose lives have been saved by it. Kirstie Alley will say at any opportunity that it was Scientology that got her off drugs. But I think a lot you have to sort of take the whole package. And as far as Hubbard goes, he was an only child. He was a fantasist, lonely guy who was also a narcissist. And I think as a writer, I mean, you can't. One of the intriguing things about Scientology is it's created by a sci-fi writer, right? There's not most other religions are created by sort of desert mystics or warriors or introspective people, but a modern-day sci-fi writer who's writing things about aliens taking over foreign galaxies. That's really that accounts for a lot of its very bizarre inflection. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, not only that, I don't think he wrote a second draft ever.
No, he didn't have time. He was just churning it out. I think a lot of stuff that they say he wrote, he did it right, like, because he was married 3 times, and at least one of his wives took credit for writing some of his stuff. I think even some stuff of Scientology may be written by his second woman, who he subsequently disavowed, said he was never married to. But the guy was, he lied about so many things. He was also abusive to his wives, I think plural. So physically, he was abusive to them. He was very, very troubled and suicidal. One of the most intriguing things in Going Clear is reading this list of, I think they call them affirmations, which when he was in, after the Second World War, he was racked with self-doubt. He thought he was a failure. He was embarrassed about his sexual urges, his compulsive masturbation, and so on and so forth. And he wrote down a list of things. Do you remember this section of it where it says, you do not feel compelled to masturbate 24 times a day. I mean, it's not literally that. It was like, you were not a disgrace to the military. You acquitted your service in the Navy very creditably. It was all these sort of lies he was telling himself to reassure himself that he was actually to feel okay about himself. It's a very humanizing document because you just see all his neurotic inclinations laid bare that then subsequently informed his lifelong attempt to, as you say, sort of therapeutic.
And I think there's other people that identify with those sort of damaged thoughts. These thoughts where they don't like their past, they don't like who they are, they don't like the pattern that they're on, and they seek to try to change that and improve upon their position, improve upon their understanding and their acceptance of themselves. And I think that's where Scientology does benefit a lot of people. And so it is tricky, like many things in this life, it's not that black and white. I mean, is it black and white that it's a cult and that there's a lot of damaging aspects of that? Yes, absolutely. It's pretty clear. When you see the people that have tried to leave it and, you know, and tell the truth about their experiences in it and how they've been harassed and hounded, and yeah, that's all pretty black and white. But I think we can, in some ways, we can sympathize with some of the people that are in it. And, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but the other thing to say is, because you started by asking what was it that made some people defend Scientology, and is it loyalty to their team? But I also think that on the outer periphery, like there are concentric rings of commitment to Scientology, and in the inner circle, it is extremely demanding and I would argue abusive and cult-like. On the outer circles, as you get further from the center, I think it can be relatively benign, and especially if you're a VIP or a celebrity in which you're exposed only to the best sorts of treatment. You're given kind of platinum card treatment. You go to the celebrity center, they roll out the red carpet for you, and I think those people feel immensely indebted to Scientology. I think that explains a lot about Tom Cruise, that he's only ever been treated like a prince when he's been in Scientology. So he feels so grateful for everything that they've done for him.
Yeah, I think his experience, when he talks about them, if he's being honest, I mean, if everyone had that experience, Scientology would be amazing. You know, when you see him when they had the happy birthday thing for him and he's dancing and everybody's cheering, like, imagine if it was just people treated you like that all the time.
Auditioning actors, like female actors, to see if they were going to be your girlfriend. Did you read that one? I mean, imagine if they rounded up the most attractive young female actors in Hollywood to see whether they would go on a date with you.
Yeah.
That would make life very simple. If you weren't married, as I am.
Would it, though? Would it? God, I don't know, man. I mean, it's just dealing with a bunch of nutty people that are willing to go through that process.
Yeah, and actually, because it would be like almost King Midas thing where you wouldn't trust any of your instincts. You would feel as though people were erecting Potemkin villages everywhere you went. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Nothing would feel quite real.
Right, that's a good point. Also, like, imagine your wife today, if you found out that your wife today was one of the people that had auditioned to be Tom Cruise's wife. I mean, if you don't make the cut, you're damaged goods for the rest of your life. You're a nutty broad who is willing to go and sign up to become Tom Cruise's new wife.
Well, to be fair, they didn't know that was the job they were going in for.
Right.
So
They were just being...
they just thought they were up for some gig. I mean, do you know what I mean? Maybe a sitcom or
Well,
something.
essentially they were. I
Yeah.
mean, and then there's also all of the... This is a difficult thing to skirt around, but the Scientology treatment of homosexuals, where they
When I find your
sort of
master,
shield
I
them
kill
from
him.
the press or hide their activity and sort of... You know what a beard is?
I do.
Yeah. They hire beards.
No, that's a great point, and I
Yeah.
think actually that's another one that, I guess we as a society have evolved a lot over the last 50 years. To some extent, Hubbard was a creature of his times and his attitudes towards homosexuality. The trouble is, because they're saying it's a religion, that's been enshrined as scripture, and so there is L. Ron Hubbard scripture that dictates that homosexuals, gays are perverts. They're 1.1 on the tone scale, which is the same as journalists, oddly enough, but it's very, very low. Basically, you are a kind of broken, deceitful, devious character.
Journalists are 1.1 of the tone.
Same as perverts. But and actually, I think quite explicit. I mean, I could go down, and that explains a lot about why it's so hard to make a documentary. In practical terms, why they don't cooperate with documentaries. They just see you as a pervert, someone who's dedicated to the abasement of humanity. It's someone who's holding humanity back from being what it should be.
That's just incredible that he's managed to define journalists under that category. The very people that we rely upon to investigate the truth and express that truth and disseminate that truth to the general public, those people are perfect.
And that's scripture as well. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
so it's not like you can argue against it in their. I mean, one of the big things they're up against is any attempt. Most kind of malfunctioning regimes, whether it's a corporate entity or something else, you say this isn't working, let's try something else. So much of what happened in Scientology, this was explained to me by one of our sources in the film, a guy called Marty Rathbun, who's very high up in Scientology. He said something could be working extremely badly inside Scientology, but if it came out of Hubbard, then you couldn't really change it. Hubbard apparently once said, the best way to wash windows is use vinegar. Don't use windows, use vinegar. And because of that, whenever they washed windows in the Sea Org, in the inner sanctums of Scientology, they had to use vinegar because Hubbard said that was how you were supposed to do it. And nothing can be changed. It's a bit like Mormons. I mean, now Mormons, I don't know how they got around. They say you don't have to be polygamous. But it's like turning an aircraft carrier around. If it comes from, basically, if it's gospel, then how do you reform? God's changed his mind. It's basically what you have to say.
Well, that is the real problem with religion, because we all recognize that no one person has ultimate truth, and especially when you're just going through this life trying to figure out yourself, trying to figure out what is this all about, this strange spinning ball that's floating in the sky and we're hurling through infinity, and what is the purpose of this existence? And there's a lot of open-ended questions that never have any answers. So when someone comes along and they have this rigid ideology where things are very clearly defined, you must ask, who is defining these things? Who is this person that is beyond reproach? And when that person is a yellow-toothed weirdo that's dressed like a captain with some medals that he put himself on his own jacket, and he's a science fiction author who wrote more bullshit than any human being has ever read, and wrote bad books. I mean, he's a bad writer.
I haven't read any of his. I've tried to read Dianetics several times. It's almost unreadable. Have you tried to read Dianetics?
I bought Dianetics once, a late night before the internet. There was a late night infomercial. I've always been a person who's really into self-help and psychology.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Because I've always tried to figure out, like, what is it about, why do people sabotage themselves? Why do I get lazy? Why do I not fulfill some of my goals? And so I really got into, like, Anthony Robbins, and I got into a lot of psychology books and self-help books. And one night I was at home and I was watching this commercial for Dianetics. So I said, all right, I'm going to call this. And I called, and I guess I gave my credit card number or whatever it was. And
Were
they
you,
s-
this is while you were an actor at this point.
I was a working actor.
Quite
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah, I was.
I mean,
was
they
doing
would have.
okay.
If they saw you coming, they would have absolutely. That would have made their year.
Well, I never went in. I
Okay.
never went there, but I did in the future. I did do the e-meter thing, but that was way later. So this is like 1994 when I just first came to Hollywood. And, you know, I was alone in my apartment in North Hollywood, probably lonely, trying to figure things out. Just got here. I want to buy your phone. Those people sent me pamphlets and paperwork and an invitation, eliminated other people's negative thoughts that are influencing the way you view your life. Eliminating the effect of past experiences that were negative and that may have defined you in some way.
Yeah, all of that, but that's basically Freud. Basically,
Yeah.
But it's Freud with a lie detector. You're hooked up to a lie detector. That, in essence, is auditing. The problem is when you read Dianetics, you realise how loopy it is, in my view, and in fact. Because sometimes, and I praise this sort of skeptical-minded approach. People say, "Well, what's your problem with Scientology? You know, all religions are kooky." But the fact is just Exhibit A is just read Dianetics. If you read the Bible, it's got loony stuff in it, but it's got passages of transcendent poetry and just parables that you can meditate on and are beautifully written, in the translated English. You read Dianetics, and it's just childish stuff about literally things about, a lot of your problems may be because when you were in utero as a fetus, your father tried to abort you. Your father tried to abort the fetus, and you can still remember that, and that's holding you back. And it's at that time, the record was playing, and every time you hear that record, it's sort of this sort of Pavlov mixed with really weird, totally unscientific ideas. And then it expands to past lives. So it's traumas or bad memories from previous lifetimes. And at that point, I was well, I wasn't on it before, but even more.
Yeah, that's hard to do. I think, but that's what we were saying earlier about rigid ideology. Rigid ideologies are always problematic because there's so many open-ended questions when it comes to being a human being on Earth, and that is a problem with religions. And that one of the things that religions do by creating these rigid ideologies is they make things so that you don't have to question stuff, and that gives some people comfort. If you know that these are the rules and you don't have to think about why homosexuality is bad or why, fill in the blank, whatever the issue is. When someone defines something like that for you, it makes it so you have less questions and you have comfort in these truths, air quotes. But that's not good for anybody. It's bad for everyone involved because there are some things that I think we've all learned. Be nice to people and it feels better to them, feels better to you. You have a healthier existence when you have harmony with your neighbors, and when you can create a good community of people that are being harmonious together and friendly together. It's a really nice place to live. That's pretty much a universal truth. There's a bunch of those that exist, but even those can be debated and discussed, and you find various approaches to the end goal of happiness. Whenever you have someone who wrote down a bunch of wacky shit like this, and then you have seemingly intelligent people defending it, like that woman that we were discussing, and that woman she did not seem stupid at all.
No, I'm sure I was reliably informed because in the film we go off and meet her ex-husband, who's now no longer in Scientology, and he describes her as a very sensitive, caring person. A lot of the assertiveness she shows, I think she probably acquired through Scientology, and a lot of Scientology training in terms of what it imparts to people is a quality of being direct, being assertive, being confident, being in charge, and being okay with sort of dominating the situations that you're in. It's one of the reasons that I think it appeals a lot to actors because it works, I think, for people who have any sort of insecurity or who are going into situations of uncertainty, and it allows you to almost reprogram your circuits in some way and be okay about using assertive body language and speech. And it also imparts a sense that you have all the truths necessary to save humanity from itself. not just humanity on Earth, but throughout time and space. And it is your obligation to ensure that those truths are saved for posterity and communicated as widely as possible in a totally unadulterated fashion, because any adulteration of the message means that not only do they not work, they become toxic and dangerous.
It seems to me that there's a bunch of things going on, and that there's some aspects of it that maybe could be beneficial, that they could extract from that.
I'm
You know, it's
sure.
almost like these people that have
American
abandoned
made, just
Scientology
like
can
me.
start Scientology light.
Well, they are doing that.
Are they?
Yeah, but one of the funny things is, once you have Scientology light, it's called the indie movement, independent Scientology, and it's often made, an analogy is made with Martin Luther and Protestantism. You know, when people said, there's nothing in the Bible about the papacy, really. There's nothing about selling indulgences and having palaces in Rome, so in the Vatican. So actually, really, there's just stuff in the Bible about following Jesus and reading the Bible. So shouldn't that be what we're doing? And so they go off. You have Protestantism. The trouble with the independent movement is, it turns out that if you remove the rather predatory money-raising side and the sort of fundamentalist controlling side, you get something a bit wishy-washy that's more or less indistinguishable from many other sort of self-help creeds. It sort of loses its potency. It's almost that the authoritarian dimension of Scientology and the way in which it demands total obedience from its followers is intrinsic to its ability to have an effect.
That's fascinating. People do, in some way, gravitate towards discipline, and that you see that in the military, like the
Yeah.
benefit of yes sir, no sir. Like that
and one of
sort
the things I talk about in the film is, we talked as well about the appeal of Scientology. Why do people defend it? So it works for some people. I think there's an obvious thing. The thin end of the wedge, you get in knee deep, and then you think, well, I've come in this far, so even though I've got doubts, I'll go a little further, and then you sort of reach a tipping point of commitment where it becomes almost embarrassing to back out. You're sort of $100,000 or more in, you're 10 years in, your family is annoyed with you, a lot of them you don't see, it's very hard to walk away from that commitment. So there's all these powerful compelling reasons for why. But the other part of it is, and this is the part that I as an outsider appreciate and I own up to in the film, is that there's something grandiose. It's a bit like Trump, right? You see these gilded casinos, you see these towering, shiny buildings, they're kind of over the top and grotesque, but they're also sort of majestic and imperial. And if you ever watch Scientology footage, there's some of it's on YouTube, and you see how they are very good at a certain kind of over-the-top aesthetic. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Almost a kind of Leni Riefenstahl-esque, with lights and flaming braziers and thousands of people surging upward in unison. And it has an effect. You sort of think, wow, these guys know how to run a show.
Yeah.
If you go into any org, have you been into they call them orgs,
No.
social organization. Okay, so near where I'm staying in Los Feliz, there's one. It's in Hillhurst, okay. And you go in, and it feels like you're kind of in a religious library, sort of designed by J. Peterman. Like the catalog company, and it had sort of old clothes and kind of distressed wooden furniture and wicker chairs, and it feels like this kind of slightly colonial, golden age of exploration feel. Do you know what I mean? And it feels very, you're sort of swept up in this narrative of we're in a place where there's adventure and a sense of order, and actually there's a sort of seductive quality to it.
Yeah, there's a seductive quality to a lot of religions. I find a seductive quality to people that are very confident in what they're saying and this ultimate truth that they're espousing. And I went to the Vatican recently, and one of the things that was really apparent to me was the sheer scale and the vast. The size of like St. Peter's. Okay, what is it? It's not St. Peter's.
Peter's.
It's not
Yeah.
cathedral. It's
It is called St. Peter's, isn't it?
yeah, the Basilica. Thank you. The Basilica, which was just to me the most amazing thing I think I've ever seen as far as like a human creation. The most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life, other than Chichen Itza, other than the Mayan pyramids. I was just stunned by the amount of work and the hundreds of years of work that had gone into creating that. But when you're there, the overall scale of it is so immense that it makes you feel pure. It makes you feel small. It makes you feel insignificant in the greater picture. And I think that's a big factor with a lot of religions, is to eliminate the power of the individual by making you feel diminished by the sheer scale of what you're seeing and what the hall that you're in.
I'm sure that's
It's
true.
intimidating.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And there's one other thing which I would add in, which is, last year, slightly on the back of doing the Scientology program, I was living in the UK and I was trying to get a program going about fundamentalist Islam, or not even fundamentalist, actually beyond, where it's extreme radical Islam, so-called, basically people who support ISIS, of which there are some in the UK, although they're hard to interview because it's actually a crime to glorify terrorism, and so they have to talk very gingerly around the subject. But if you get into a debate about someone who is sincerely committed to ISIS brand of Sunni Islam, right, where they're saying actually, yeah, sex slaves are okay. They'll say like slaves isn't quite the right term, but we approve that, blah blah blah. And then they say, well, by what authority do you challenge what we believe? Right? When you start coming at them with some kind of humanistic, secular, liberal sort of view of life, and you try and explain, well, I don't have an authority as such, I'm not preaching a religion. I'm just saying, it's kind of better to be nice to people. And they say, but based on under what authority? That you find that you actually don't really have. It's surprisingly difficult when you're thrown back on first principles to make the case for a sort of sensitive, secular way of doing things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
One of the appeals of, I think, whether it's Scientology or Islam or Christianity, extreme Christianity, whatever form that takes, they can say, like, we have our answers, they're in a book, and God told us. And so who told you? And I'm like, well, no one told me. I'm relying on a 2 millennia old tradition, founded in, Greco-Roman times, with various people, interpreters over the years, but actually, I can't really articulate that in 10 words. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's surprisingly hard. So once you're in the prison of a faith-based system, it's very hard to kind of leverage your way out. I didn't do a good job of trying to get out.
Well, it's very difficult when they say that, like, by what authority? And you realize that you don't have any, and they think they do.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets weird.
Yeah, you're like, I don't have a book, like, whatever we call the other way of doing things, And also, you don't want to say, like, well, in Western, you're trying not to, because whether we like it or not, all our beliefs have some sort of geographic and temporal specificity to them. As much as we might well say that there are golden rules that exist in time and space, I don't think there really are. These are all kind of constructed.
Right, like all of culture.
Yeah, like all truths, all culture. And so you're having to say, well, over the last few hundred years since the Enlightenment, we found that in general torture is not a brilliant idea, and capital punishment's not great, and slavery is largely discredited. And they say, well, so this is about the Western Enlightenment, that's your authority? And I don't want to be kind of basing it on that. So I slightly made a hash of it. After I did the interview, my producer said to me, yeah, I kind of owned you in that interview. The guy who's like the ISIS defender, he's in prison now. That was why one of the reasons we didn't finish the documentary. Anyway, that's sort of going off on a tangent.
What did he go to prison for?
For allegedly glorifying terrorism.
Did you hear that Twitter yesterday banned 235,000 Twitter handles for promoting terrorism? 235,000. That's incredible.
I'd be intrigued to know how they define promoting terrorism.
Yeah, I
is
would
that
as well.
would that all be Islamic? Or?
Yes, or I would assume, because I am not. So it must be that.
But
yeah.
I wonder if they could. There was a conservative Breitbart blogger who was banned.
Milo Yiannopoulos.
Yeah.
That was very sketchy. I don't agree with what he said, but if you really pay attention to what he said, it was very sketchy.
I mean, if you believe in freedom of speech or you don't, kind of.
Yes. And all he did was he made a post on Breitbart about the Ghostbusters movie, and it was very critical. He basically called it a piece of shit. It was a terrible movie. He said it was this ridiculous feminist film, and that creating this all-female Ghostbusters cast where all the men are buffoons. And
Did he not flame the African-American actor?
He flamed everyone. He called them fat and ugly and disgusting. And what he's saying is essentially like, look, I'm bitchy. He's bitchy all the time. He's a very flamboyantly gay guy. He's been in this podcast a couple times. He's hilarious. I find him funny.
I follow him on Twitter. He
used to. They banned him. But here's what's interesting. He didn't do anything bad on Twitter. When you look at what he said on Twitter, it was like nothing. It was like nothing more than she had said, Leslie Jones had said a bunch of things about him or what other people had said about her, and she wrote something down that was just poor grammar, and he wrote, my word, barely literate, such a shame, schools in America. That's essentially what he wrote, and then he was banned. I mean, that is really mild stuff. I mean, I think there's a problem, first of all, that he's conservative, and they don't like that, and that he does attack feminists and social justice warriors and progressives and the left, and he goes after them, and that's essentially the whole base of Twitter. Twitter has this, what do they call it again? What is their council? They have some strange, it's very overwhelming. It's like a safety and trust and safety council or things.
A watchdog group within Twitter that keeps tabs on it.
Well, who decides what is and is not harassment, and it's sort of like placating people who are recreationally outraged by other people's opinions.
The trouble is, it's a public space that is basically a court of entity. So in essence, they can do whatever they want legally, right?
Yeah, but it's very ideologically based. It's very left-wing. It's very weird in that way. Which I am in many ways left-wing. So when I read what they're saying, I agree in some ways, but outside of actual real harassment, I just don't think that you should be able to just ban someone because they, call someone a bitch or call someone ugly. It doesn't seem to me...
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you. I mean, I feel as though we're in a weird place. We're off on a tangent slightly, but, it was around the time of Charlie Hebdo, which was, everyone was marching for the right to be offensive, right? And around the same time, trolling became a buzzword, and it was the idea that we should stop trolling. And there's a certain disconnect we're living through as a culture to do with wanting to defend the right to be offensive, but also come down hard on trolling. And actually, at a certain point, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah. Well, there was also a lot of people that were defending what had happened in Charlie Hebdo by saying that those cartoons were really racist. They were going so far pro-Islamic to sort of...
I'm going to say, what I heard was, because I understood this, was some people saying, absolutely, it's a crime, it's hideous, and people have the right to be, to be offensive, but I'm not going to valorize the message or even hold these people up as free speech martyrs any more than I would do if Tom Metzger or neo-Nazi was killed. He does not thereby become a hero. He becomes a victim of a lynch mob, of a murderous campaign. But I'm not thereby a supporter of his output.
Apparently he's outside. He's supposed to be in next window. Whoops, Tom. Yeah, I think...
So Penn, for example, I think it's the American...
Magician?
No, Writers Union. It's a guild of writers that supports the rights of writers around the world in America. And they said, well, we don't want to give an award. So there was a divide among them. Should we give an award to Charlie Hebdo? By giving them an award, are you thereby saying we support you for saying that Muhammad was shit, whatever they were saying? Or are you, in other words, do you get an award for being killed? There's a little bit of a conflict there.
Yes.
In other words, so I'm sympathetic to people who feel that absolutely it was a crime, it was hideous, Islamo-fascists killed Charlie Hebdo, but that does not thereby make Charlie Hebdo's message a laudable or creditable
Someone
one.
else. Freak
Yes,
bag.
that's a really good point, because what were they doing and what was the point of what they were doing?
Yeah.
Were they just trying to be funny? Was it parody? I don't know if it was funny, because I don't speak French and I haven't really paid any attention to the translations. Because to me,
Some of
there's
it seemed
something-
funny, some of it didn't seem that funny. But if Julius Streicher, right, I don't want to compare them directly with this, but an offensive propagandist for the Nazis, just to take an example. I shouldn't even go down this road. Because once you know Nazis, just clouds of it.
Yeah, as soon as you say Hitler.
Yeah, it's a kind of thought blocking. It blocks all.
He's worse than Hitler, this Trump.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the real bottom line is people were killed for cartoons. There's no way to defend it, right? I think everyone agrees.
We agree with that.
But does that make the cartoons good? It certainly doesn't. No. They could be shit cartoons and people were killed for shit cartoons. It's wrong to kill people for shit cartoons. But the cartoons are still shit. Well, let's bring it back to Scientology, because that's one of the interesting things about Scientology is that anyone who is a quote-unquote opponent of Scientology, they are allowed to violate pretty much all of their principles and just go after you. You are the enemy.
Yes.
And you there's a whole different set of rules for engaging with someone who's a separatist. I like how they do that. That's what they do in the military too, by the way. IEDs, they abbreviate things.
Acronyms, and a lot of stuff that in Scientology is based on Hubbard's naval experience. They dress up in naval uniforms, and he loved things like little, bulletins or anything that felt kind of quasi-military, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They in a way, it's a mixture of some military kind of naval stuff and then some corporate style stuff. What it isn't is a lot of religious stuff. Like, that is the one thing that you don't get a flavor of in terms of the way they dress and drill. There's some show business, you've got a little touch of Hollywood, you've got a touch of naval. You don't have any sense of it being kind of spiritual or religious.
Yeah.
I'm talking in the way they style themselves, the language they use. They're constantly using abbreviations that are more or less unintelligible to the outsider. Which, by the way, is a lot of how, allegedly, according to experts on thought reform or cults, so-called, they say that by learning a new language, it's part of what gets you caught up in the thought patterns of an abusive system.
Well, that's also military people. If you talk to people who really have a deep understanding of the military, or people who love the military, they love to talk in those acronyms. They love to use them because it sort of lets everybody know that you're on the inside.
Yes.
It's like when people talk about cars or anything where it's there's a surface knowledge that most people have. Oh, that is a Ferrari. Oh, that is a Corvette. But then there's deep knowledge. You start going into different types of gearing and the axles, and it's got 411 rear end and this and that, and you're like, oh, he knows. He's the deep knowledge. He has the deep knowledge.
Gun juice is running low.
Well, there's the deep knowledge of the military, and a lot of that is sort of expressed
Find your
through
master.
acronyms.
I'm killing him.
Yes.
They do that.
UVAR, and they do all that
Yes.
stuff. So that's a big part of how they operate. And I think as well, this is something I mentioned before. It is important to bear in mind as well that as much as Scientology kind of casts the world in us and them terms, which is very characteristic of a lot of systems of thought that are inimical to freedom or free way of thinking. It's us and them. It's like Bush saying, you're either with us or against us. And in Scientology, in a famous statement of Tom Cruise's that he gave in 2004 when he was given a Freedom Medal of Valor at a big Scientology awards ceremony in England, he said, you're either playing on the pitch or you're out of the arena. Right,
That's the one when they gave him that gold dinner
they gave him
plate.
a huge, like a Flavor Flav style gong, so his thing is like you're either on the pitch or get out of the arena because there's no half measures. Get in or you're out, and that whole idea, like if you're not part of the solution, the problem, it's a very dangerous, slippery road to go down because you're then by definition saying there's good guys and bad guys, and if you're not on my team, you're a bad guy.
Well, let's define what the solution is. Sit down. Tell us about what are thetans. Explain to me how thetans. They throw them into a volcano. What happens?
Well, I'm going to sound weird now because, like, one of my promises that I made to myself was that I would never gratuitously mock the beliefs of Scientology. And one of the things they find offensive is to reveal some of the secret truths that are unveiled. I take a step back. unique to Scientology is that it's a mystery religion, meaning that many of its beliefs are unveiled as you advance up the ladder of enlightenment. Okay, so you don't at day one get told. Unlike with Jesus and Christianity, on day one you're told he died on the cross for your sins, believeth in him, and you will be saved and go to heaven. There's no kind of catch or later sort of amendment that gets made when you're a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line. In Scientology, you learn more as you go up. Some say that this is partly something that owes to Crowley, or Aleister Crowley, I think it's pronounced, you know, and that Hubbard had practiced a form of Satanism when he was living in Pasadena in the 40s, right after the Second World War, and incorporated that aspect of it. And it is quite a seductive idea, the idea, oh, I'm going to learn more as I go on, a kind of unraveling mystery. So that is part of Scientology, and when you get to the OT levels, which is once you've gone clear, which is sort of half.
And OT is operating
Thetan, yeah. So to begin with, like, going clear was originally the best thing you could do, and then subsequently he added more levels and more layers, and you get to the OT, and there's 8 published OT levels, and OT3, various secrets are revealed, and allegedly, if an uninitiated OT or an uninitiated person is shown the secrets, it makes them go crazy. But one of the things that, you're not in the and every documentary about Scientology it rejoices in telling you what the OT stuff is, and I think you were about to touch on it. I promised myself that I wouldn't reveal them because I sort of felt, it's a little cheap when all these documentaries say, this is what you $100,000 in, or 200 or 500,000. You're going to learn what happens at OT3, and then they spoil the surprise for everyone. And I also felt like I'd like to be able to say to it, if I ever meet a Scientologist, I mean, I'm sure I've met some, but without knowing it, but if I ever meet Tom Cruise or Ben, I want to be able to say, like, you know what, I didn't ever do anything. I have a right to know my truth and express my truth. I don't want to mock you. I don't want to make, but you have a right to believe what you want to believe. And if you think, no more than I'd force a Jewish guy to eat pork or tell a Rastafarian to cut his hair. And so I'm not going to say to an OT, I know what happens at OT3, and it sounds like a bunch of junk.
Well, you don't even have to say it's a bunch of junk, but just expressing, I think there's what we know, okay, what we know about their doctrine,
yes,
or whatever you want to call it, their scripture. And there's an amazing moment in the documentary, the HBO documentary, where it was Paul Higgs? Is that what his name? Haggis.
He gets to OT3. Yeah,
yes.
You're going to say it. Fine.
He gets to OT3 and he starts reading some of the handwritten stuff by L. Ron Hubbard.
There's a whole palaver. It's an interesting bit in the book too. Do you remember, like, he's guided into a room, and literally it's almost like they take it out of a safety deposit box and kind of open it up with gloves and white gloved hands, and then there's a handwritten piece of parchment inside, written in Hubbard's manuscript, and you read it in that room, and then the guy has a kind of little routine he follows, like the person who brought you in comes in and says, has it been read and comprehended, or something like that, right? And then you've read it and you go like, yes, and then ask and it shall be done, or something, and then they put it back in and take it away. Yeah.
Well, it must be.
It's a great sense of theatre.
Yes.
Like, I love. It's like being in the Masons, or all that secret squirrel stuff is very appealing.
Secret squirrel. Yeah, I forgot about secret squirrel. Yeah, that. But I think it's important to talk about what we know about what that is, about what is.
That's fine. I mean, it's out there, it's on the internet. What I would say is what they believe is that man is an immortal spirit, and you are not your body. You are the spirit, and the spirit is a thetan. That's the term they use for spirit. And your spirit, you in essence, have lived multiple lifetimes in multiple bodies, going back millennia and going forward millennia.
And that's not a unique thought.
No, I mean
unique to them.
No, you have that in Buddhism, but unlike in Buddhism, the transmigration of souls does not resides only in humans, right? I don't think you can become a chipmunk, right? Which you can in Buddhism, I think.
Great. Here come the
I do not know.
And I think, depending on how your karma is, and that's number one. And number two, which is even more important, or just as important, is that you can carry your memories through the lifetime using Scientology. And the gift that Scientology gives you is the ability to retain your memories and your identity across multiple lifetimes, and that's why it's so important to a Scientologist to recollect his or her past lifetimes, because it suggests that you're now on your cosmic destiny, and you will carry it forward into your when you next incarnate.
These are all unique ideas. I mean, they're interesting, but when you know the source of all of it, and yet they ignore it, and they choose to not pay attention to the other things that he read or wrote, rather, like Battlefield Earth, that movie with John Travolta. Did you ever see that?
I never saw that one.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's right up there with. Did you ever see Showgirls?
Yes, I have seen Showgirls.
Showgirls is like a tour de force of writing a movie while you're high on cocaine.
It's Joe Esterhazy wrote that, and Paul Verhoeven directed it. It's a great combination.
It's one of the best unintentional comedies that's ever been made.
I'd argue that because Verhoeven's a brilliant director, right?
Yeah.
And Starship Troopers he made, and the first RoboCop. He knew. I think he knew what he was doing. I think he has a keen eye for camp, and thought this is hilarious. Don't you? Esterhazy maybe not.
It could have been. It could have been. I think they were just coked out of their mind, and they made a wacky fucking movie, and they probably thought it was great. Like, fucking print it. Yeah. Let's go out. Let's hit the Ivy. And I don't know. I mean, I think they were just out of their mind. I mean, if you watch that film, there's a scene where what is her name? Elizabeth Berkley.
Yeah.
And the other guy from
I can't remember who.
Blue Lagoon.
Is
that
it?
What he's from? Was he from? What was that TV show that he was on? The handsome one, Kyle. Fuck's his name?
McLachlan? Is it?
Yeah, Kyle MacLachlan. They're having sex in a pool, and she starts flopping around like a fish. Like, she literally starts having spasms. Like, if you continue to have sex with her, I feel like that's rape. Like, this is a woman who's having a goddamn seizure, and you're going to keep having sex with her? Have you ever seen this scene?
No.
It's
wonderful.
wonderful.
Well, I've seen the movie, so yes,
Yeah.
I must have.
It's wonderful. They're having sex, and she starts flailing like as if she's having a goddamn stroke. She's in the middle of a heart attack or a seizure. And that choice is the only thing that haunts me about that movie. Like, maybe it is, maybe it wasn't. Maybe they're doing it on purpose.
I think it was. But, I read an interview with the director of Battlefield Earth. Is it Battlefield Earth?
Yes.
And he apparently is a pretty good director, and he's a European, I think, maybe French. And I think he just didn't know what he was walking into, And I think he didn't really check out what the gig was.
Well, that was a product of John Travolta.
Yeah,
wasn't
I
it?
think Travolta was back
Labor of
driving
Love.
it, maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's wonderfully done.
Yeah. There's a funny bit in Going Clear in the book where I think Cruise sees it. And it's like, this is so embarrassing for Scientology. He's really upset about it.
Well, he was upset that they showed that video of him, saluting, to LRH. They salute when they got the medal,
Right.
All that crazy
Same,
shit.
it's all over YouTube.
The recruitment
Was he
video.
upset about that being leaked?
Yeah. Oh, they tried to get that taken down. Of course, it spread like wildfire through the internet because you just can't take things like that down.
No, it's classic. Although a lot of stuff's been, there are a lot of great Scientology videos that have been taken down.
Really?
Yes, like there's a famous one, it's very hard to find, it's the orientation video that was shown to new parishioners. This is back in the 80s, and it was done by an infomercial pitchman who was then a Scientologist and then subsequently left. By the way, do you know they don't cast Scientologists in Scientology commercials? Do you know why?
Why?
Because they blow too often, like they leave, and then they no longer want to be in the video, or it becomes embarrassing to have someone speak. Can you imagine if Leah Remini was in a commercial for Scientology? They'd never be able to use it again, right?
Right.
So they can't. It's sort of insurance because they want to be able to use They spend a lot of money on the commercial, and they don't want to be embarrassed when the Scientologist who's the star of the commercial leaves Scientology and says that they were brainwashed.
That's their actual reason for
That's
doing
what I'm
it?
told, yeah.
How many of them left?
Let's
say the
lots.
retention rate.
They keep the data very close to their chest. So I know that they have, they save millions. I think they save 14 million, some vast amount worldwide. I know that on Tony Ortega's blog, I think there's a US Census data that suggesting the US
That just never gets old.
But I believe I read that there are more people who identify as Jedi as their religion
Great shot.
than there
That's
are
me.
Scientologists.
I'm a Jedi. I just decided. Is it a long process to become a Jedi, or can you just claim it?
I think it's a long process, but it's very cheap. It's the good thing.
Oh, well, I've watched all the movies. I think I'm in. It's amazing to me that this exists. I understand that it exists. Intellectually, when I sit back and I look at the many, many different religions and many, many different ideologies that people subscribe to, and the mass amount of people out there that are searching for truth and answer and something to belong to. Even that, even though all those things make sense to me intellectually, I'm still fascinated. I'm still so puzzled that in 2016, with the internet, with all the access to information that we have today, that still exists.
It's and you look forward and you wonder, it will, is this going to fizzle out? But I think what they've done is they've kind of created a marketing juggernaut that is, if not immune to, but at least highly resistant to any attempt to discredit or undermine. So I read a thing that said, well, it's a religion that sells secrets, right? That's its USP. You advance up, you pay more money to get the more secret levels, and the internet is kryptonite to that, because the internet is a machine for revealing secrets, WikiLeaks and whatnot. You can Google anything. So that will be Scientology Waterloo. Will be the fact that we now have searchable things. But it shows no signs of coming apart. That the numbers may not be high, but the amounts of revenue coming in and are huge from what I can tell. And I get the feeling that, you just have to see how, the amount that they're able to spend on advertising, the number of new buildings that go up. So however small it may be, it has a huge punching power.
Where are they getting the money from?
It's an interesting point.
Was using that
The
anyway.
first thing is that it's structured almost like a McDonald's. So, and in fact, interestingly, in 1950, the year that Dianetics was published, was also the first year that McDonald's was established. It's pointed out, but I don't know if you ever read Janet Reitman's book, Inside Scientology. It came out a year before Larry Wright's book, Going Clear. But so it was slightly, its thunder was stolen by Going Clear, but it's also an excellent book and a great primer. If you enjoyed Going Clear, I highly recommend Inside Scientology. And she points this out, that in 1950, McDonald's was invented, and so was Dianetics. So they basically it's a franchise system in which they are sort of selling they own the property of the various buildings in which Scientology is sold, and then they license the materials, but they can't really, some of the franchisees can lose money, but Scientology itself can't really lose money, because they're just getting rents from the people who are selling the Scientology. Does that make sense, the services?
It doesn't make sense that they get that much revenue from that.
Well,
I know
they
they're
get
gigantic real estate.
So they have huge amounts of real estate. The other part of it is that because it's a religion, the money is tax deductible or whatever. Like, they don't pay taxes on it in essence, and so I think that means that it's very hard for them to lose money, because it's a huge cushion against financial failure.
Well, that was a really disturbing part of the documentary that showed how they became a tax-exempt religion. The government essentially caved under the threat of massive amounts of lawsuits.
Yes, yeah, they were. Basically, the Scientologists found a way to pressure individual IRS employees to the point where their lives have become extremely hard. So they settled.
What year was that?
I want to say, get this right, 92, I would say. 92, maybe 93.
It's amazing that that's upheld.
I know. But then again, the benchmark for having charitable status is not that high. Look at the Clinton Foundation, right? There are the people scrutinizing what qualifies as a charitable enterprise do not seem to be
Working.
especially on top of their game. And I think once that's in place, I think the other part of it is, so you pay, one of the routes for finance is you pay for services, you turn up, you spend. I want auditing, so I'll get an auditing package for $300, and you get whatever 5 sessions. But the other thing is they solicit donations, and 5 or 6 times a year they have large events. And that's the footage of Tom Cruise is at one of these events, and they're like these huge Hollywood-style award ceremonies where they pack hundreds of Scientologies into an auditorium, and they both look quite impressive. So to the outsider, they look grandiose and impressive. But they are, in essence, a live infomercial event where everyone who's there is then aggressively regged, which means they're aggressively hit up for donations. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So anytime you see one of those events, all those people who are at the event, before they can leave, someone comes up to them and says, how committed to Scientology are you? We would sincerely appreciate an expression of your support. And they're guilt-tripped into making a donation, a tax-deductible donation. And I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling, but there's a lot of information. So they get huge amounts of money for that. And that money then... one of the good things about that is that can never be revoked. Like if you leave, one of the problems they had in the past was if you spend $10,000 on credit and say, I love Scientology, this is going to be amazing, and then you like $1,000 into your services, you're like, this isn't doing anything, I want to leave. And then you ask for your money back, and it's very hard for you to get your money back. Whereas the donations that are made to something called the IAS, Association of Scientologists, you can't get those back once you leave. Anyway, I'll make it very simple for you. There's very rich Scientologists who make large donations. There's a guy called Bob Duggan who's a multi-billionaire who's donated literally tens of millions.
Didn't you hear? I'm a crack
I mean,
shot.
and there's a lot of actors who...
Well, Leah Remini
Nancy
is one of the. She's one of the most famous detractors. Person who's left.
Right until she was like one of its most famous supporters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's weird because like her turnaround was like that.
Yeah.
I know.
I have a lot of respect for. I mean, I think there's a lot of guys like this guy who I was talking about this pitch, the infomercial pitch man who did the orientation video that was taken down from YouTube. He's called Larry Anderson, right? And I really wanted to interview him for our film because I just thought the orientation video is so funny. It's one of this it's this video where they say he goes, "Welcome to Scientology. If at the end of this video you decide this is not for you, that's fine. You're welcome to leave. Just as you're free to jump off, throw yourself off a bridge, or blow your brains out." And so it's this very over-the-top kind of thing. It's just ludicrous. But he left Scientology, so they couldn't show it anymore. But he left, like most high-profile defectors, he just didn't want anything more to do with it. He's just like, I'm done. And very often they cut the deal where they say, fine, Scientology will say, like, we'll let you do the X, Y, and Z, whether it's get some money back, speak to your people, your friends and family who are still in Scientology, but we don't want you speaking out. And so then the defector will be like, okay, fine, I want to But Leah Remini, to her credit, has actually, gone out there and absolutely made it a mission to call them out.
How far did she get?
I don't know where I think she was quite far. Most of the actors, I think actors, they're considered people of influence, and so they get a certain amount of services for free. That's the impression I have. And so I think they're encouraged to go up the bridge quite quickly.
I had a neighbor who was a Scientologist, and he wanted to buy a piece of property, and we had a discussion about this. How I found out he was a Scientologist. He said out of nowhere, we started talking about this. He's like, yeah, I'm thinking about buying it, but right now my wife is about to go clear. And I go, this is a long time. I go, what does that mean? And then he starts expressing what it means, and that she's no longer going to be influenced by negative thoughts. This is going to cost $50,000. And
It's probably more now.
Probably. This is the 90s. $50,000 for a ceremony where you're no longer going to be influenced by negative thoughts.
And then you find out, actually, footnote, there's this other thing you have to deal with. And then there's another, like, 15 levels. So, yeah. It's a funny one.
Did you talk to Leah Remini?
We approached her. I should explain that. We took a specific approach. We knew going into it, I had been gestating this idea for years, and I'd been fascinated with Scientology going back to the late 80s when I was a student, and then I remember in 90 or 91 I took a tour around the L. Ron Hubbard Life exhibit there on Hollywood Boulevard, and had this weird feeling of, if you've ever gone in where you just think, wow, it's like they took a person who was kind of an average sci-fi writer and attempted to make him sound like he was the second coming of Jesus. And so everything is spun, and it's just a weird feeling, you know, seeing a whole museum dedicated to someone who seems to have been a relatively unremarkable person. Do you know what I mean? And so they're working extremely hard, saying like, he was one of the youngest ever Eagle Scouts to ever qualify in the state of Montana. And you're like, what?
I need to make my way back to the main
And I was like, my dad was an Eagle Scout. Like, that's not that big a deal, is it? And so then I remember halfway through I thought, well, this was funny for 10 minutes, and then an hour later when you're on this guided tour, I've had enough. And so I said, I really need to leave. I want to see is more important than seeing the rest of it. And I suddenly felt under pressure, that uncomfortable feeling of like, oh wow. And I had to pretend that I needed to be somewhere just to get out of the building. Anyway, so years go by and I think I'd love to make a program about it, and then I could never quite find... I approached them and they said, long story short, we're not really interested. They took me on a tour of the Celebrity Centre, they strung me along for a bit, but it was pretty clear quite quickly that they weren't going to let me in. So a few more years went by, and I was approached by a Hollywood producer called Simon Chin, who made Man on Wire and Searching for Sugar Man. So he's well credentialed, and he's like, you should do something about Scientology. I gave him the spiel about why I hadn't, because they won't let me in. And as you know, my way of making documentaries is by invitation. I make an approach and people say yes, and they let me in.
Oh, you're very polite in your
yes,
approach.
and actually, I've done whatever, big game hunting, or the Westboro Baptist Church, or gurus in India. But it's always, I say, like, can we come and film? And they say yes, and we do it. So I just couldn't get my head around how you make a film where the people don't want you to make the film, as I knew they didn't, and have it be still true to what I do in some way. And I didn't want it to be a kind of just poking them for the sake of it type of thing. Anyway, we decided that there was a way of doing it using reenactments, in which we took a sort of meta approach to the reenactments, where the whole process of casting and reenacting how you do Scientology using actors was filmed. In other words, we filmed casting a character to play Tom Cruise, casting an actor to play David Miscavige, and role-playing the different lines, and used ex-Scientologists to kind of co-direct. So they were like, this is how you do it, and this is what Scientology is, and this was what it was like when I was in Scientology. And really, part of it was knowing that once we did that in and around Hollywood, that because Hollywood is so central to Scientology, they would get wind of what we were doing and would start coming to us. So there'd be this wraparound of them, and sure enough, they turned up and started filming us. And it turned out they were making a documentary about me making my film about Scientology. So then it becomes a sort of...
When is that getting released?
January. It's out in the UK in October, but January.
No, I mean yours. The one on you.
Oh, their one. I think it'll come out... It's a great question. I'm surprised it's not out yet. I think it'll come out probably in January.
And what do you think it'll be about?
I think it'll be a lot like what they have done to other journalists. They did one to Gibney. They did one on Larry Wright. They do them on ex-Scientologists if they're of sufficient kind of profile. It'll be a 10 to 15 minute thing. They'll extract any photograph where I look like a dick, or I look ugly or ludicrous, any ill-advised bit of publicity I ever did where I was promoting a series and I was like look goofy. They'll say like, this is a serious journalist, and then they'll take quotes from interviews out of context to make it sound like either a goofball or a malicious deceiver. And if you want to really see the DNA of Scientology, because occasionally I get caught in this mindset of like, it's just another religion, isn't it? There's no better or worse than other religions, really. And then sometimes you can slightly lose, you go native slightly, or you're on their websites and you think, something makes sense. But if you look at how they attack their enemies, they're so unlike other religions, certainly unlike Christianity for the most part. So official Scientology's pronouncements when they attack ex-members and journalists are so sort of tabloid and childish and so malicious and nasty. You really see into something deep about their mindset. Because their view, as you mentioned, is that if you're a suppressive person, i.e. someone who's attempting to hold Scientology back, then you are fair game. Anything, they could do almost anything to try and put you out of business.
Do you think that these documentaries, whether it's Going Clear or the book by Lawrence Wright or the other woman, what was it, the name of the book?
Janet Wright,
Yours was her book.
Inside Scientology.
Do you think that all this data, this accumulative data, it reaches any of the members that are inside Scientology? They don't ever examine it?
No way. It's considered N-theta, which is a Scientology term. It means enturbulated theta. I love it. It's like Katniss be explaining this stuff.
Is it?
Yeah, kind of. It's like I said, I was steeped in it for 3 years, kind of absorbing all this.
Was it your whole life? Or did
No,
you
it
do other
wasn't. It was
things?
just like it was not constantly, but you would spend a few days. Hours would go by, and at the end of it, you emerge and like, have I learned anything? All I know now is these absurd terms that are no use to anyone, like N-theta, but enturbulated theta energy is, thetans are spirits, theta is spiritual, positive spiritual energy, but enturbulated is bad. So it's basically, N-theta is kind of bad for your energy, I think. So it's N-theta for you to be in Scientology, and it could be exposed to anything negative, anything critical of Scientology. So they're encouraged to be off the internet and to be off, don't consume anything you think might be critical.
They're encouraged to be off the internet. Wow.
Oh well, I should say that applies to people within the Sea Org, in the inner circle of Scientology. And I really want to
explain that.
Yeah, it's a really important distinction because I'm absolutely certain that there's plenty of extremely nice, well-adjusted Scientologists, people who consider themselves Scientologists.
My ex-neighbor.
Yeah.
He was a really nice guy.
I bet he was. And I'm sure everything I hear about Beck, the musician, is that he's a nice guy, and I'm sure Giovanni Ribisi is a nice guy. Yeah. Really? You didn't know that? Yeah. And Jenna Elfman. I mean, there's a...
Julia Lucas.
Yeah. I bet she's nice.
I bet she's very nice. She and I have gone back and forth. We talk to each other through messages on Twitter.
Yeah.
How do they get her in?
And Danny Masterson. He's that 70s show.
He's in too?
Yeah.
Let's do that again.
And Jason Lee, I think he might be out.
Really?
You know who I mean? My name is Earl.
Yeah, that guy's in?
Yeah. Man, you didn't spend very long down the rabbit hole.
Well, my rabbit hole was not limited. I try to avoid any rabbit hole that involves celebrities.
But Scientology is predicated on... One thing L. Ron Hubbard got right was the idea that if you get celebrities in,
Yes.
then you've got a golden ticket to reaching the masses.
Yeah, I jokingly thought about joining when I first came to this. Become a Scientologist.
You could make a document about Scientology that would be totally different because... actually, maybe we've blown But if you'd gone undercover... yeah.
I don't think they would listen. They probably fucking hate it.
Well, it depends what you've got out there. It's too
I'm
late
not
now.
a documentary maker either.
We've
I
blown
don't
it.
have that sort of attention span that you have.
You could have gone undercover, and you would have been such a great scout for them. They would have absolutely. Because when was the last time you heard of an established celebrity actor joining? Like, I mean, can you imagine if?
Maybe they can.
I mean, that's
clean it
why
up.
when Will Smith, there was a sniff that he might be going that way, and it went and it didn't pan out. But that was like unbelievable, and they were trying. There was a rumor that David Beckham might be flirting with it. But I mean, none of these things were borne out.
Well, what they could do for you, if you were a David Beckham, or maybe even for me, is they could act as like a gang. Sort of like covers your back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think they'd be. And when I was doing the film, I went in, not exactly undercover, but I went in not for a sequence in the film. I just to sort of keep myself grounded, to keep it all real. Because one of the challenges with when you're not exposed, you're not actually having day-to-day contact with the subject that you're covering, it's very easy to slip into a us and them mentality of your own. And like, ooh, scary Scientologists, ooh, they're bad. And actually, you know, they're not really good people, many of them. And so I wanted to make them real, and I went along to Scientology.org and just sort of chatted to some people and said, you know, I'm going to make documentaries. I think I'm interested in this subject and, you know, what's it all about. They really did. One of the things they do is a fairly hard sell, but you got the impression that they would 100% kind of take your money. No, I
They
think
would accept you.
yeah, they would take your money, but they would absolutely, I think, be right on it. You know, I kind of lost confidence in. I was going to say 100% kind of have your back and be your gang, but I don't know if I really did have that sense. I think if they knew you were a celebrity, if they thought you were, they would really go. That you would get special treatment.
I was in San Diego. I was filming this television show. We had a few hours downtime, and they had one of those booths set up where you would go over there and hold on to those cans, the e-meter. I did all that.
How many sessions did you do? Or?
Just one while I was there.
I bet it was pretty good, was it?
It was boring. The guy who I got was very unenthusiastic. He's just. It seemed like something they required him.
You're supposed to be unenthusiastic.
Oh yeah.
Well, on the e-meters, there's a script for how it's called being an auditor. When someone's auditing you, in a sense, being the therapist, they have a script. They have to sit there comfortably, but they are not supposed to show any emotion when they're auditing you. Now
He was doing it publicly too.
Yeah.
He was holding on to this thing and asking me questions.
Was he reading the needle and saying?
Yes.
And did he say like, is there a prior or something? There's a whole script they sort of say. And did you have to say like I had back pain and then? Do you remember what road you went down with your?
Hardly. I just remember thinking this guy.
It's nothing that special.
Yeah, the guy seemed like they were forcing him to do it. It didn't seem like this was something he was interested in. He's just like really not interested in what he's doing. And he seemed like a volunteer.
That's interesting. I mean, if on the when they're auditing, they're supposed to be somewhat blank. Big thing in Scientology is sort of being comfortable in yourself and not like learning how to stare at someone. But there's a drill that we do in the film where you have to sit and stare at someone without saying anything, literally for minutes, if not hours. And it's like it's actually a powerful tool because it's all about I'm unembarrassable. You know, I'm gonna own any sort of sense of awkwardness by just like, I'm impermeable to any kind of social influence you think you could put on it. It's one of the paradoxes of it being kind of controlling religious movement because so much of it is about controlling yourself. Do you know what I mean?
And not allowing other people's thoughts or negative actions to control you.
And actually a big thing as well, and one of the things Tom Cruise talks about when he's in his video is PTSP, confronting shattering suppression. I don't think I said they got my acronym right, but anyway, his thing is he's like he says like one of the best things he learned in Scientology was how to confront and shatter suppression. Right? So anytime you see him in an interview, and there's a few of them on YouTube where he thinks he's getting a cheeky question. You can see he kind of gets a steely look where it's a sort of, it's not exactly adversarial, it's just like, no, you're out of line, buddy. And
Well, the Matt Lauer interview,
yeah,
which was devastating for his career in his short term. He recovered from it. But that was a window into madness.
yes.
And into what he's really all about. And,
That's the scary part. I mean, as much as I say, like, there's a big chunk of it that feels kind of valid and normal, maybe even therapeutic. But when you tip into thinking that you're the only one, that you have, like, you're the authority on mental illness, and that's dangerous.
And individual issues with people that you have not diagnosed, you don't have any medical training whatsoever, you don't know what their specific neurochemistry is, you don't know the effect of the medication and whether it's enhancing or hurting them, and you just have this blanket view of psychiatry. That was an issue that L. Ron Hubbard had. And if you go down Sunset, I think it's Sunset.
On Sunset, yeah,
that
near,
has that
near
psychiatry
Highland.
kills.
It's psychiatry, the industry of death.
Yeah.
That's a fun afternoon.
And that's one of their centers, right?
Yeah.
If you go in there,
They
they'll
call it
explain
the
to you.
CCHR, Citizens Commission on Human Rights.
And, and here's my issue with that. I think prescription drugs are overprescribed.
Big
I
time.
think there's a real argument that there's a lot of people that are on antidepressants that shouldn't be on antidepressants. I think there's a lot of natural alternatives, one of them being exercise, one of them being enhancing your standing in life in terms of like what you do for a living or where you live or the people that you hang out with. All those things can affect the way you feel, and that can be interpreted as depression. There's a lot of there's a reason if your life is shit, if all the aspects of your life is shit, you feel bad. The solution's not a pill, right? So I think in some ways they've got something to say that makes some sort of sense.
Well, but and in a weird way, though, that's the dangerous part because it intersects with Scientology intersects with a totally valid social critique, right? The trouble is if you have someone who's heavily psychotic and it's not a medication-induced psychosis. Psychosis is a real medical phenomenon. And Scientology's not going to take them on. If you go to Scientology and say, I'm interested in Scientology, I've had a couple of psychotic breaks, but I really think you could help me out, they're not going to say, oh, come with us. They'll run a mile from you.
Really?
So they're critiquing people who they have no intention of helping themselves.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and if you say, oh, and by the way, I've used in the past, I was medicated for my psychosis, they'll say, well, that disqualifies you from treatment. When I went to my one, they said, what forms of intervention have you had in the past? Have you done any sort of psychiatry? Have you had any problems like that? And I said, well, no, but I've had, a little bit of therapy over the years. I said, what have you done? I said, I did a few sessions of CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. It's kind of bog standard, talking about, problems, things you could do differently. The woman was like, oh, okay, just give me 5 minutes, okay? And she left the room to check whether that disqualified me and came back and said, oh, yeah, that's not a problem. Okay, let's carry on.
But if you had gone on some sort of medication...
If I'd said I was on Zyprexa for 10 years because I had an episode when I thought I was a poached egg for a few weeks, that she would have said, oh, well, good luck with that, and don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Oh, wow. So they're not interested in treating people that have had treatment.
No.
Ooh, that's weird.
No, they'll say, good, tough break on this life, good luck in your next life. They really would. We should check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Oh, man, that's fascinating.
And there's an interest, if you want to read, we don't go into this in the documentary, but if you can read up on the internet about cases where there's been people who had mental illness either within Scientology. I mean, perhaps the most famous scandal within Scientology, or the most notorious to Scientology watchers, was the case of Lisa McPherson. Do you know about her?
She's the one that died?
Yeah, she's done in detail in Inside Scientology in the Janet Reitman book. She was a paid-up Scientologist, took it very, very seriously, a young woman, maybe 30, and she had a psychotic episode in Florida, and instead of being taken and given bed care in a facility, she was taken by Scientologists from a hospital and more or less sequestered in a hotel for a week or maybe longer, and died in the hands of the Scientologists.
And what was her cause of death?
I believe it was dehydration. We should double check on that.
Wow. That's a rough way to go.
Yeah. And she'd been having, total psychotic break. She was, I think, attacking who attempted to, take care or holding her hostage. And, there was a whole script that Hubbard had for dealing with people with psychosis, but I don't think it was medically supported. It was basically involved. Kind of locked them in a room.
Now, I saw an interview with you where you were talking about someone who used to be a former Scientologist, a woman. She wasn't a former Scientologist. She had gone undercover to sort of investigate things.
Oh, yeah.
And you were talking about the auditing having a positive benefit.
Yes. I think it probably does. I mean, I think any kind of...
It did it on you.
Yeah. I mean, the auditing I did, I only did one session. And that was with, the main guy in the film is a guy called Marty Radcliffe, and he was in it. There's a sense in which the film is as much about him as it is about Scientology. He was a Mr. Fix-It within Scientology. He was the number two to David Miscavige. David Miscavige is the guy who took over in 1986 or thereabouts from L. Ron Hubbard and has been running it ever since. He's an unaccountable leader who is in essence the Pope of Scientology, and there are many allegations of him being physically abusive towards his followers. Marty Rathbun was his right-hand man for many years. Marty Rathbun left in 2004 or thereabouts, and he's sort of our deep throat in the film. But he also cops to the fact that when he was in Scientology, he was involved in all kinds of devious, covert activity involving private investigators, destruction of documents, and also a certain amount of physical violence himself, which he apologized for. And so it becomes a sort of examination of him and his ability to, the fact that he's been seduced by this thing, and it's still in certain ways, it's still in him. Almost by definition, you can't be in something that long left. Leah Remini was a celebrity in Georgia. She was going around the celebrity set. She was doing Scientology, but she was not in the SEAL. The SEAL is the clergy. It's the difference between someone who goes to the Catholic Church a few times a year, right, and eats communion and I think some praise a few times. That's okay. You can be a Scientologist in that way, which maybe your neighbor was. But if you're in the SEAL, it's somewhere between being in the Vatican and being a monk. You take a vow of poverty, you volunteer, you take a vow of poverty. You get paid below minimum wage, tiny amounts. You lead a Spartan existence to save the planet. You sign a contract for 40 billion years or something. I think it is literally because it's supposed to cover all your future lifetimes, right? So when you come back, you're still in the Sea Org. In fact, their slogan is something like "Vein Artemis" or whatever the Latin is. It's "We come back," meaning like we come back in future lifetimes, and we're still going to be in the Sea Org. Anyway. So it's really important to get that distinction because, I wouldn't want people to have the impression that everyone in Scientology is sort of going around in a uniform, marching around on in a vow of poverty. That's just the Sea Org guys, and most of them many of them live down in Hemet outside LA. And that's where...
Where's Hemet?
It's outside, if you head towards Palm Springs, basically. It's in the desert.
That's where they live?
Yeah, there's a base down there.
Oh, they have some giant center down there that they're going to start producing movies, right?
Well, there's a center in Hollywood that they've just bought, yeah. That they've just, in fact, not just bought, they've just refurbed it and they've opened it.
And they're going to open it to...
Movie, which is bizarre because they have...
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
$50 million movie and TV studio complex in Hollywood.
That just opened. But they have a complex in Hemet as well, bizarrely. So I don't know why they need another one.
They like buying shit. They're apparently at one point in time they were the number 2 real estate holders in Los Angeles.
Well, that's amazing. Is that true? Not or maybe Hollywood, not Los Angeles.
Maybe. I don't know.
But I think a lot of that is to do with. Someone explained this to me. One of the rules about non-profit or about being a religion, having their religious status, is they cannot hoard their income. Like money that comes in has to be spent, otherwise they're in violation of their charitable status. So someone just told me the other day. So in other words, they have to kind of keep buying buildings because there needs to be cash outflow. Which sort of makes sense, right?
Yeah, that's totally understandable. Yeah, that makes sense. Wow.
And then so this guy Marty Rathbun, who's sort of my guide through Scientology, and he's a fascinating guy.
And Marty was in for how long?
I want to say 24 years, maybe it was 27 years, but I think it's a 27.
What a nice outfit. Nice uniform.
Got the uniform. He was
golden ropes around the shoulder.
I'll say this about him. If you're in it and you're up to the top echelons as he was, you are on some kind of crazy sci-fi adventure. If you think about it, I think it's real. You are living.
Look at that.
You are living a kind of Jedi reality.
Look at that rope. It goes across the chest.
You're saving planets.
What is his medals for? Look at all his medals.
No, that might be. Some of them are photoshopped.
Oh, really?
Yeah, occasionally they add it. Well, that might not be. Some of them add medals just to make fun of. That might be a real one.
But the one that was above it seems real, right? Now look at that one.
That's real.
Now,
so he doesn't look like that now because that's 30 years.
How amazing is it that they give them military medals? I mean, it looks like no different than what a general would have. What
I
is,
mean, it's a beautiful thing in a way. I mean, it's an exciting life. They probably wouldn't be doing the dishes in that outfit like that.
No.
Special occasions.
Special. And I'm sure he would get special treatment. I'm sure being the number 2 guy has been amazing.
Yes and no, because you basically there's only really a number 1, which is David Miscavige, and then there's just everyone else. Do you know what I mean? Oh well, there's Tom Cruise, and then there's it.
And Tom Cruise is kind of number 1, right?
Well,
He's
no,
right up there.
No, because actually, don't you remember in Lawrence Wright's book, there's a bit where Tom Cruise explains, I think maybe to Leslie Moriarty, his girlfriend at the time, he says, like, he's annoyed with his girlfriend. This is after he split up from
Penelope Cruz? The Australian girl?
yeah, you know,
Thank you.
who, by the way, she was considered an SD because her father was a psychiatrist, I believe. Anyway, so he went out with a woman called Leslie Moriarty for a while, and there's a section in Going Clear where they talk about, I think Miscavige came around for dinner or something, and I think it was Nat. Anyway, his girlfriend at the time was having trouble understanding what Miscavige was saying. He speaks quite fast, and so she was like, "What are you saying?" And Tom Cruise was really upset and said, "Don't you get it? There's LRH, then there's David Miscavige. COB is what they call it. Then there's COB, and then there's me."
You're doing a goddamn good Tom Cruise impression.
It's just
Do
be
that again.
intensive.
Do that
Don't
again.
you get it? There's LRH, then there's COB, and then there's me. Don't you get it?
You're glib.
You're glib,
man.
You're glib, man. You're glib.
That's a really good impression.
You just got to be. You know what?
Feel him.
Whatever
Feel
this,
him
what this
saying that.
helped. Like, I don't think I need Scientology if I've got
Caveman
Caveman
coffee.
Nitro.
Yeah, 270 milligrams of
That's
caffeine.
given me
Yeah.
like an OT edge. I'm on OT5.
You know what Morning Thunder is? You mix this Caveman coffee with some emulsified MCT oil and an iced coffee. That's what I have every morning.
What is emulsified MCT?
It's MCT oil that you can mix very easily with cold beverages.
What is
hot.
MCT oil?
Medium chain triglyceride oil. It's the most nutritious aspects of coconut oil that are blended together. They spin in a centrifuge. Extract
Can we just do a commercial?
You can get it anywhere. MCT oil is readily available at any sort of health food store, and a lot of Erewhon and Whole Foods and those type of places carry it. You know coconut oil, right?
Yeah.
They're healthy fats. They're a really good food.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So
So
that's morning fun.
The point being, we are on so many tangents.
Yeah, we
right
went
now.
off.
But your original
COB.
question,
What does COB stand
COB
for?
is chairman of the board. There we go. COBRTC. There we go.
LRH. COB.
Then there's Glib. Then there's Glib. Then there's MATLAB. And then there's John Travolta. Just
So-
apparently they have quite didn't believe John Travolta.
What? Why?
This is
All the butt fucking, or what is it?
I think
Massage
he's
therapy?
viewed. I don't know. Marty Rathbun top. That's allegedly. Can I throw in allegedly?
Allegedly.
I'm just part of everything. No, a lot of what I'm saying is based on, once he left, Marty Rathbun spilled his guts on the internet. In the name, in order to let people know what was going on, and he was the biggest thing, I would say, in terms of exposing Scientology for what it is. Probably in Scientology.
John Travolta's wife was on Fear Factor. And I got to meet John Travolta because his wife was in the finals. She lost to Coolio, who was... By the way, you want to talk about a guy who performs very well under the influence of marijuana. Coolio might be at the top of the list, right up there with Joey Diaz. Coolio, they would open up his trailer. It was like a Cheech and Chong movie. It was hilarious. And he would go out there and he would perform these stunts just high as a kite. I mean, just gone. Because you look in his eyes, they were just glazed over, and he would perform flawlessly. And the last stunt involved balance. It was his balance thing. And I had a conversation with him before we did it. And I was, unfortunately, stone cold sober at the time, I believe. And Coolio was, he's like, I've done this a million times in a million different lives in other universe. I'm ready to do it right now. I'm like, get after it, sir. Good luck to you. But John Travolta's wife, what is her name again?
Kelly Preston.
She's very, very nice. Very nice, and seems so normal. You know, I had conversations with her, and she even sent me a gift. There was some sort of protein powder that she was drinking, some health drink that she was drinking. I asked her about it, and she said, you know, give me your address, I'll have some sent to you, and this and that. So she sent some to the studio, I believe. She was very nice.
I'm sure. Well, Greta Van Susteren is a Scientologist.
Get the fuck out of here!
That's the one that surprises me.
Really?
Isn't she a journalist? I would have thought.
Yes.
I would have thought
Fox
that.
News.
Yeah.
Does that
so
count?
Is she on the? I don't know. Is she
She
on
a
the
journal?
tone scale or not? I don't really get.
Yeah, how
that
can
works.
she be?
Maybe
She's
there's
inside.
maybe there's an exception.
Well, I met her once as well. She seemed very nice as well. There was something about George Carlin.
I'm sure she is nice, and I'm sure you can be. I mean, not to sound too bad.
Well, again, my neighbor, who was my former neighbor many years ago, was a very nice guy. And I've met a lot of Scientologists inside of Hollywood, and they all have this actory thing going on, which is, I would like to believe they are as nice as they're pretending to me, but I'm not sure. You know that actory thing? Like,
Yes, and I know one of my early experiences when I was talking to a Scientologist, when I was trying to first negotiate access to the church back in 2003, was I'd sent her some old documentaries that I'd done. So this is who I am, this is what I do, and she was on the phone. She said, "Oh yeah, I got the DVDs," and I was watching, and she started laughing in the act of talking about.
like a fake laugh?
Yeah, and I was like, that didn't. I was like, that didn't.
Yeah.
And then later on, another person I knew who was a Scientologist did the same thing. Where I saw the thing you did on television.
Oh, that's a pet peeve of mine. That is a giant.
Maybe that's part of what we do is sort of some kind of weird love bomb. Maybe that was just.
It makes sense because they're trying to be influential and they're trying to be charming.
Yeah.
Right? I find a lot of the Scientologists that I've met, actors, they're extremely charming. Like, one of the things you hear about Tom Cruise, he looks you in the eye, he talks to you, you know.
I'm sure that's true. I mean, they drill, as I said, they drill on looking people in the eye.
But let's just assume that that's his real behavior pattern now. It's a very good behavior pattern.
Nice. Yeah,
Right, it's very nice.
I'm in favor of positivity.
Yes.
Although I think the world needs negative people.
What?
I think there need to be some.
What?
Get
But
turned
wait a minute.
back
The
on.
It's
whole
part of the ecology of life. is to have-
yin and yang.
yeah. If everyone was positive, then, I mean, it would be a little too much.
Well, it would be very strange if the world did become enlightened. Like, what if some pharmaceutical company devised some pill that eliminates all the negative aspects of humanity?
So much.
And we all just started taking it.
Yeah.
I mean, look, how many people brush their teeth? Pretty much everybody, right? What if everybody started doing whatever this is? This new thing, which it became prevalent throughout the world, like vaccinations,
Yeah.
right? Pretty much, I would estimate high 90% of the Western world is vaccinated. Every now and then I meet some kid who had hippie parents and they, gave him apple cider vinegar and they never vaccinated him. There's a few of those exist. But for the most part, most people are vaccinated to prevent against diseases. If we came up with some sort of a vaccination to prevent the more disgusting aspects of human beings, negative behavior, aggression, meanness, I'd be very curious as to how that would play out, whether or not that would diminish ambition and progress, and who knows?
Yes, I think it is, it's like you said, the yin and the yang. I think Scientology aspires to be that, and I think the danger of it is it would bear certain similarities to a sort of almost fascist vision, I think. I mean, I think there is an overlap with the cult of health, cult of glowing, smiling beacons of health and humanity marching up and down, and actually it's our ability to rub along with difficult characters and to sort of embrace the other side is, I can't define exactly what it is, but I feel like that's an important dimension of life.
Well, it certainly seems to be that there's a dynamic that plays out between human beings, and that we learn not just from the positives, but also from the negatives. And I learn a lot from other people's negative behavior, how to never be like that myself without having to make those same mistakes. Also learn from my own mistakes, I'm sure. But when we see horrible things in the news and negative things, I think that does sort of reinforce how fortunate you are that you're not experiencing those horrible things, and that there is some sort of an understanding of the worst aspects of people, where it broadens your spectrum of
I
possibilities.
agree, but I also think that many of my favorite writers you would probably define in some sense as walking the negative side of life. You know, you think about
Hunter Thompson.
Hunter Thompson, or William Burroughs, or you know,
Hemingway.
Philip Roth, if you like. You know,
Sure.
talking about the absolutely contemptible and disgusting influences we feel. Bukowski.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's absolutely Rimbaud. You know, the French poet. This is who we are. I think it's ineradicable, and I think I'm suspicious of anything that mythologizes it too much. And says, you know what, that's sort of, which Scientology does in fact. They say that's your reactive mind. It's
Right.
a malfunctioning part of your mind. It's pseudo-scientific thing, whereas actually Christianity, I'm not a Christian, but it sort of embraces the fact that it's just your human side. You know, your human side is earthly and twisted and sexual, and actually you need to embrace it.
Well, I think most religions or ideologies like this that are trying to promote some sort of advancement, they look to the past and to the horrific nature of animal behavior, the tooth, fang, and claw of the wild, and the recognition that somehow or another we've emerged from that, and that we aspire to be better. And then that we know that in our own lives, I mean, if you look at your own life as a microcosm, you've sort of figured out what you've done wrong, hopefully, and have advanced past those days of youth and foolish behavior, and you're now a wiser, more educated person, and you seek to continue to advance and continue to do better. So it's sort of like, it's all analogous, it all sort of ties in together. Now, when people go too hard with that, and when people go too hard with eliminating the bad behavior, I always wonder if, like L. Ron Hubbard himself, if he was, you know, when you talk about him self-diagnosing and self-treating, if that's what they're doing as well. It's like, do you know that, like, there's an old expression that, well, there's an old thing that you see with women that are sexually loose, that they always like to point the finger at other girls that are sexually loose. It's like one of the first indications that a girl might be a slut, is that she likes to point at other girls, and it's a real common thing. And I think that the things that annoy you the most about yourself, you tend to highlight those aspects when you discuss human beings, other people that irritate you.
I'm sure there's something in that. They say, yes, my dad likes to quote, there's a philosopher working with Elias Canetti who's had an aphorism that the thieves' hell is the fear of thieves. So that we sort of project our qualities to others, and it fills us with anxiety that they may be that. To go to the other point, though, it would be wonderful to feel that we advance through life acquiring wisdom. I don't know that it's necessarily the case. And what strikes me about Hubbard is that, the merit that you see in Scientology, the bit of textual work that will make sense, seem to have come out fairly early on. And then later on, stuff he was coming out with was more and more outlandish. Whatever therapies he was evolving, when it went to the OT levels, it was really getting fucked out. I mean, whether that, maybe he was spiraling. I mean, there's allegations that he was fully mentally ill, at least for episodes towards the end of his life. And
well, he spent a great deal of time. The Sea Org was kind of concocted because he had to be in the ocean.
He had to be, first of all, away from America. So he took to the sea.
So he didn't get prosecuted.
Basically, as I understand it, yes. And so he had a sort of ocean-going religion where they were kind of traveling around, and then for a while he was in England, and then for a while he was in what was then Rhodesia, what is now Zimbabwe, sort of trying to find a niche, find a kind of new frontier that he could more or less make for his own kind of claim for Scientology. But then even when he came back, he was so caught up in lawsuits in the last 10 or 15 years of his life, people pursuing him for money because they they felt that Scientology had made them psychotic, or they just thought it was fraudulent, or that they wanted their money back. He had to disappear and was living in seclusion, more or less hiding out, while money was kind of shuttled back and forth to him. And that's why I said at the beginning, the problem with Scientology is an overabundance of material. You probably saw The Mask that night. Thomas Anderson film.
I fell asleep. I was
Yeah.
watching it in a hotel room and I passed out.
It had its moments, but there's so many weird stories within Scientology.
And The Master is loosely based on something.
I would say fairly closely based on aspects of L. Ron Hubbard. Yeah. I mean,
Is that public? I mean, have they acknowledged that?
I think he had a screen with Tom Cruise, and I think he publicly said it wasn't based on L. Ron Hubbard.
What did Tom say?
I think Tom said,
You're glib.
do you hear?
Ran out of the room.
What do you hear about Tom? Like, everyone seems to say he's a good guy. Like, you meet him, he's like, as you say, very focused, very attentive.
I've heard several things. One, that he's not as short as everybody says. A lot of people want to say he's like 5'2". Apparently he's 5'9". That's what I've heard. But who knows? Could be wearing some funky stuff in his shoes. That he's very funny. That he's very focused, very intense, very charming, very charismatic, very smart, and seems to be genuinely interested in what he does.
I mean, I heard the same thing. If you, what's your line on if Tom Cruise is interviewed on a chat show, you feel he should be asked about Scientology?
No, you ask him about whatever. I think chat shows, as you put them, are pretty much bullshit anyway. Because what they really are is you have a 7-minute chunk where you're supposed to be promoting some movie about a super spy that fucking rappels down from the ceiling and gets past lasers. And that's really, or the other. I think he's a great actor. I love that movie. What is it, The Edge of Tomorrow? Is that what it's called? I love that movie.
That was the time travel one. I love time travel. Oh, sort of like Groundhog Day meets Mission.
Yeah, meets Alien. It's a great movie. I really enjoyed it. I think he's a great actor, and I think you have to be fucking crazy to be a great actor.
He was good in that too. And you know what was nice in that was that he started out like in that movie as a kind of non-Tom Cruise character. Do you remember he's kind of cowardly and slightly weak, and he learns in the course of the movie to become Tom Cruise. Whereas, and it felt refreshing after seeing so many kind of Cruise as Ubermensch films, which, by the way, I think is part of Scientology as well, because he doesn't want to take on roles that are uncreative.
Yes.
In other words, one of the things I learned was members of the SEAL who are taking this vow of poverty, live extremely abstemious, cloistered lives, and they're not allowed to go to the movies for the most part, except when a Tom Cruise movie comes out. So you know it better have a positive, uplifting message.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So they would literally be bussed, I was told, to the cinemas to watch the matinee performances.
Are they held back while the previews are playing?
It's a good question.
I would imagine they would have to be.
Or they might
maybe
see. What do you think would be the worst thing that they've seen? Probably a preview from that film.
Yeah, that would not be good.
They would,
God, how ironic.
their eyes would drop out of their heads.
Yeah.
But and I think that's one of the perhaps issues they have with John Travolta as well, is that he's playing heroin addict.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, he really embraces some very bizarre roles.
Yeah, he was in drag in Hairspray. They probably didn't like that.
Yeah.
He's very good though. He's very good. But don't you love John Travolta though?
Great time. I do. I love him. I think he's a great actor.
He's so good. And don't you feel like we've been on such a journey with him? From Billy Barberini.
Yeah.
He's like,
he's a fascinating character, and I met him as well when his wife was on the show. He was very nice, but it was that thing, where he's like really engaging, looks in the eyes, very present.
you think he's gay?
People say that he's gay.